In every rural town in America, there is a house that is believed to be haunted.
This is an original wall. Stayed 3 days, and after the second day he said, "Did you know there are ghosts in your house?"
Especially if that town is of immigrant origins.
They just always stared at you with a certain glare.
The couch felt like it was being shaken from the corner.
In Castell, Texas, in central Llano County, there's one girl, Joanna. There is one such house. Who died on the ship. I'm Jeanine Plumer with Haunted Texas, a history, travelogue, and mystery show. We believe ghosts exist not because of how they died, but rather how they lived.
At the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, thousands of German peasants were lured with false promises to New Germany, which at the time was more commonly referred to as the Republic of Texas.
The Lifeste family set out on an overseas journey in search of a better life. Tragically, one of their 5 children didn't reach their new home. 21-year-old Johanna was one of many Germans to become sick, die, and buried at sea.
In 1842, Germany was a land of territories, governed by men and women of noble blood who had supreme authority over the land and people who lived on it. This was the timeless system known as feudalism. In Germany, the Industrial Revolution was well underway, and the elite few were divided. Half believed Germany should become a monarchy like France and England. The other half, the conservatives, strongly disagreed. 21 princes, dukes, counts, and barons gathered at Biebrich Palace on April 20th, 1842, and created the Society of Noblemen and began their plan to replicate Old Germany in New Germany, Texas. They advertised. For a one-time payment of $240 per family, the Society would provide transportation to the Texas colony, a log house, farming tools, public buildings such as schools and churches, and most important, 320 acres of land. All other Texas settlers were given a league of land, 640 acres, but the Society amended the contract and kept half of the land for themselves to ensure that their Texas colony would remain like Old Germany.
The letters of one German immigrant, Bernhard Munken, gave his family back in his homeland, and us, a glimpse of the hardships and misery these travelers faced in New Germany.
My father was a wine grower on the banks of the Rhine River. The immigration fever, so prevalent at the time all through Germany, also struck my father, partly after going through a half-dozen poor crop years, and probably because the unrest of the year 1848 was already in the air.
Nevertheless, the hope, if you survive, the future will be great for your children. That is the driving force.
It wasn't long before the Society's goals for New Germany started to unravel. Arriving on the scene near Galveston, John Moisenbach, a German baron who would renounce his nobility, recognized the fallacies of the Society's plan.
They had no experience with finances and made very poor decisions and were not aware of it at first. But then when von Moisebach came and looked at it with some knowledge, he already knew that sooner or later the Society would go bankrupt financially.
After a cash stipulation was made in the old country, the company agreed to land them safely and see to their comforts, but failed utterly to do so. The Society expected to dictate every decision from the castle, but it took 8 weeks for a letter to travel from Germany to the Texas coast. Some problems arose that couldn't be helped. It was the month of October 1845 that our family embarked on the two-masted schooner Neptune for our overseas trip, which lasted 58 days. As the sailing lasted longer than intended, we began to suffer for want of water.
The society had a few oxen carts, and then the United States started a war with Mexico and confiscated a lot of the wagons.
Other matters were the result of the society's bad planning.
Even if they had land grants, that was also just made up.
Prince Psalms was sent by the society to oversee the colonization. He wrote a series of letters that went from informative reports to frantic pleas for help.
The government grants an enormous extent of remotely situated land in which the grantee receives, under the most stringent stipulations, much unfit and a little good land.
Because basically this was Indian country, mainly Comanches, and some other tribes had it as their hunting ground.
Our position is, as we knew before I left England, that in effect we own no land on which to start colonization. The first 392 Germans to land on Texas soil, who had just been on a ship for 2 months, were met with nothing. The designated 6-month provisions barely lasted 6 weeks, particularly bread and salted meat. Vegetables lasted perhaps a little longer.
And people were sick. There was a lot of rain and swamps and diseases.
It was the middle of winter. There was no shelter, no food, no firewood, and there was no water. And there were no wagons to transport the Germans inland as had been promised. The disease we suffered was taking more malignant form. First, one of the Feetsoms died. Then the one who had so laboriously made it on foot with father. And finally, the youngest brother of the Feetsoms also died. When it was not raining, we had to have these huts to escape the burning rays of the sun. Under these circumstances, it's no wonder that people got sick and died. It is impossible to make trips from the west to this place, since the distance is great, from 130 to 140 miles. Most of the way is uninhabited and is frequented by Indians and marauders. After waiting quite a while, my father concluded to walk from Indianola to New Braunfels to see if he could procure accommodations and provide for transportation. During the next 6 months, 36 ships brought 5,257 Germans. Most were stranded on the coast. Cholera, typhoid, and spinal meningitis swept through the encampments again and again and were carried to towns along trails inland by those settlers who traveled west on foot.
In all, a third of the Germans succumbed to disease, dehydration, exposure, and accidents en route to New Germany.
I've had it as a bed and breakfast. I've had 8 or 10, people come to me after they stayed there and they said, "There's things happening in your house." I said, "Don't worry about it, they're all good ones."
Randy Leifeste is a descendant of the original Leifeste family who came to Texas in the 1800s.
2 ladies stayed there, and it was in the wintertime, and it was really cold. They had a fire in the fireplace, but then the fire burned down, and the next morning they came over and told me, they said, "We had some things sitting on the mantle, some wine glasses and things." Well, the next morning they were in the kitchen. We didn't put them there.
There are some stories around that pickup truck.
Yeah.
Do you know what they are?
Well, that's related to my father. He definitely believed in ghosts and things like that. And he said that he would go out there sometimes in the middle of the night and he thought he saw his father sitting in the pickup.
It's not uncommon to feel the presence of ancestors who died in multi-generational homes, such as the Leifestes. Still, Johanna died on the voyage and never lived in the Leifeste family home. Could it be possible that her spirit stayed with the family?
These are the original family photos. They were on my wall. My wife was like, we need to put those. They were in their living room. She says, they just always stared at you with a certain glare or stare, and she just, I don't know where we want to put these in the house, and she put them behind the chair for now.
Felt like they were watching.
They felt like they just had to.
This is the original LaFeste family homestead, built by Edwin in 1924. Incorporated inside of these walls are the original stone structure and log cabin that was built by the first Germans to land on Texas soil.
The original house is built around the house.
Today, the property belongs to Mark, his wife, and their 2 children.
Yeah, this is the bell from the old church across the street, across the river, the Methodist church over there. Yeah, that's the original barn on the LaFeste homestead. This is the house original ice box. They would actually go by wagon into land out of the ice house with blankets, wrap it up in blankets, and then drive back.
What really was cool and interesting was that you still see glass jars and bottles and walls and nails that are all from the original people that were there.
We just remodeled in the kitchen. With that, behind that mirror there's a old rock wall, and then when you guys crawl up in the attic, you'll actually be able to see the remnants of the old wall.
As we made our way through the house, we could see remnants of the family's past. We all experienced a very welcoming feeling. Clearly, it was not just the ancestors' belongings that remained from the past.
What really got my attention was when I turned it into a bed and breakfast. I had a college professor, a PhD from University of Houston. He came and stayed 3 days. And after the second day, he said, "Did you know there are ghosts in your house?" I said, "Well, I've always suspected it." And he said, "No, there are 26 of them. And they're all up around there. I've seen them. They're all your relatives, and they're all good ghosts." And he said he had been studying ghosts for 30 years.
Finding out who exactly was still lingering around the old LaFeste homestead was easy. Like most large, proud immigrant families, a handful of relatives took it upon themselves to delve into the family genealogy. They discovered their family reached the Texas coast and traveled more than 300 miles to finally settle in Castell. Today, Castell is the only remaining town of those established by the Society of German Noblemen. This branch of the LaFeste family began when a village sheep herder, August, his wife Sophie, and their 5 children boarded a ship bound for Texas in 1852. After arriving in Texas, Sophie had 4 more children in what then was a log cabin. Sophie was one of the many LaFeste family members to die in the house, as did her husband August, many years later. Soon after Sophie passed away, her newly married son Carl moved in with his wife Emily. He built a stone house next to the cabin where their 9 children were born, and tragically, in 1900, at the age of 35, Emily died. Through the years, other family members lived and died at the LaFeste family home. What is your memory of your grandfather? He died and there was a wake in the house.
He died, and there was a wake in the house. He was there in the open casket, and he stayed there right by the window, which is right underneath where his father, his grandfather, and his grandfather.
We spent an hour after sunset in the LaFeste family house to find out which relatives still remained. I had really read a lot about the family, and really knew every member of that family that had lived in that house. There were certain ones that stood out. For instance, there was Emily, who was a young mother and died suddenly. They stay because of the grief, and they actually become, to comfort in their own way, or just to be around. And what happens is time passes, and they don't realize that time has passed, and so they stay. So I wonder if Emily remained in the house because of her ties to her children.
I'm getting the sense that she would absolutely want to be close to her family at that time.
I think it happened so fast, and I think it was so violent. I was thinking about them. The people who had lived there, that died there, there was so many births, so many deaths, so many weddings, and I feel great sadness. I feel like that's one of the biggest energies in this place. And I'm feeling cool air right now, just a little bit.
I'm feeling vibration.
We're getting their attention. I was really immersed in remembering the lives of those people. They would have washed her, and they would have put her in her wedding gown, because you used your wedding gown twice when you were married and you were buried in it. And it was very sudden.
Do you know what she did?
You know what's weird about her death is that it was a complete mystery. Apparently they had no idea what she died of.
Is anybody else moving?
Vibrations, while sitting on a bed or a couch, are an example of a common physical reaction experienced by those in a haunted house.
We were talking about the history of the house, which is usually a provocative method to stir up activity. And the couch felt like it was bouncing.
Yeah, so what's happening to me, I'll describe it, is that in the center of my stomach, it began to, for lack of a better way to describe it, it began to shake like jelly, but rippled.
While Dennis was describing his experience, our infrared camera captured these almost translucent light phenomena. These light phenomena may be the actual physical manifestations of the energy generated around the spirits. Our recording devices also picked up some compelling EVPs, electronic voice phenomena.
Electronic voice phenomenon is basically audio phenomenon that shows up on a recording device, whether it be analog or digital, after the recording session is done. As we were passing through this hallway into the next bedroom, we picked up a very interesting EVP that sounded like they were hearing us. And of course, we couldn't hear them. Upon review of the audio tape, we heard what sounded like two men having a conversation saying they heard something.
So let's move. See what happens.
Now, interestingly enough, the hallway was painted gray. So I'm wondering if they were, in some other dimensional sense, hearing us as we were walking down the hallway.
Of the Life Estate family that came from Germany, there was one girl, Joanna. I knew that I was going to bring her name up. I just remember thinking that probably she was in everyone's memory all the time, you know, just because she was the missing one. And I wonder if she's in this house. She's one of the ones I suspect. They will attach to other family members and just kind of stay with them, and often you could think of them as guardian angels. So when I read about her death, I was pretty sure that she could possibly still be around. And in fact, I saw a light. When I mentioned her name, we recorded this. Johanna remained kind of with the family as like a guardian angel. Johanna.
This is where the theory starts to work itself around the idea that if you speak to the nature of the place that you're at, if the place has a particular history, and you start speaking in terms that it recognizes as historically accurate or relevant to their being, they will in kind respond to you and say, yes, that's me.
I have heard hundreds of stories of people who have lost a grandparent, a parent, or even a friend, and they feel like they remain close by, much like the Life Estate family. But what if you don't have an ancestral home? Does it matter? No. A loved one can attach themselves to someone much like Johanna. It is often said that if you lose a child, you gain a guardian angel.